Recovery is stupendous.
Achievable.
Hope.
Freedom.
Empowering.
It's unique to everyone.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Getting a new lease on life.
It's finding restoration after you fall down.
Recovery is having the freedom to enjoy life.
For me, it was finding a way to really love myself.
My recovery is possible in part because of my own sense of purpose.
Welcome to Montana's Peer Network Recovery Talks podcast. I'm Jim Haney, Executive Director, and today I am joined by Kayla Myers. She's a family peer supporter for Montana's Peer Network. Welcome, Kayla.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me.
So this is May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and all month in our podcast, we're featuring different topics on mental health. If you would like more information on Mental Health Awareness Month, you can visit samhsa.gov, Mental Health Awareness Month. SAMHSA is SAMHSA.gov, or you can really just type in Mental Health Awareness Month. It comes right up. This is a really great site. They have tons of information, including toolkits and PSAs. They have messages from the director. There's information about things going on all across the country. If you need immediate support, there's the 988 Lifeline number. There are events going on each week, so sort of depending on when you're listening to this, I'm looking at the page right now, and it's almost every day the entire month of May. They're taking on different topics: mental health for older adults, moving awareness from awareness to acceptance, self-care practices for youth, children's behavioral health, many pathways. It's really got a lot of great information. Again, that's SAMHSA's Mental Health Awareness Month. And so today with Kayla, we're going to talk about parental mental health, being a mom, and Kayla's experience with mental health, mental wellness. This is great because I don't know that we've done this exact topic. I think we've talked a lot about family supporters, and we've talked about what it's like to be a mom with a child with special healthcare needs. We've done that topic, but this one's a little different. So I want to say thank you again for coming on, and let's jump into it, Kayla.
Absolutely. I think this is important and the perfect month to talk about it.
Yeah. So when did you know that your mental health was affecting you?
Yeah, it's kind of a complex question, and we'll get to all of it. But when I really, really felt it in my own body, in my own mind, when I just didn't feel like myself, was when I had moved out and went to college. I started having these really intense, really scary panic attacks. They didn't happen all the time. They would happen every 6 to 8 months, but it literally felt like I was having a heart attack, and I would go to the urgent care. They would do an EKG, and it was scary. It was really, really scary to me as still a young mind that's not unsure of what's happening inside of me. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Plus you were out on your own, college,
Yes.
Away from home, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they talk to you about mental health? I mean, when you were in the urgent care, did that even come up?
Well, no. And it was kind of my friend and she went with me the first time, and it was kind of a joke to us even. I mean, I was like, please tell my family. I really thought I was dying. Like, all joking aside, I really thought I was having a heart attack. And, they just said, I think you're having a panic attack, and we're going to give you this to calm you down today. And we're going to set you up with a primary care visit tomorrow and follow up on that. And I was kind of like, I was on my way. No care plan, no action plan, nothing. It was just kind of like, oh, you're just having a panic attack, and here's a medication, follow up with primary. The only thing I would say that the primary care doctor said to me that sticks in my mind to this day is when I did go the next day was sometimes we might not know why our body has anxiety, but what our body is telling us is there's some unresolved trauma, unresolved, something in there that our body's making us deal with that our brain hasn't dealt with, processed, or we haven't acknowledged ourselves.
And so what were up until that point, did you understand that like what a panic attack was? Did you have awareness of that, like anxiety and those kinds of things?
Yeah. I pride, throughout my life, I look back and I think of myself as somebody that was very empathetic, in tune with everyone else around me, what they're feeling, what they were needing, what they were wanting, but very unaware of what I was feeling, needing, wanting, crying out for. So I feel like my examples of mental health were really lived through the eyes of others. I saw depression, and depression to me was that severe depressed state, and suicide, and that scary aspect that people correlate mental health to. Anxiety was, I'm anxious. It was very minimalized. And then I think all of the other layers of mental health were, still pretty minimized, or I didn't have a lot of experience with others in my life that had mental health. And then my father had been in and out of jail since I was a fourth grader, sorry. And so I associated mental health as well with addiction and, kind of that realm. So it was very big. I guess if I could go back and look at what I thought mental health was at that time, was these very big, extreme things that people went through: depression, addiction, bipolar. They were the extreme.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't something you were experiencing because it was something else, and you weren't quite at that place. So then what happened? So you're in school, you're in college, you end up in the urgent care. You said more than once. That happened to you more than once?
Yes. And I look back and wish, a health care provider, a friend. My mom was very supportive, and if anything, she was the one that pushed me to go to the primary care appointments, or to follow up, or but I wish I would have had enough knowledge and understanding of what mental health could lead to if it's untreated and recognized within yourself, what the road that you're going to lead yourself down. If you ignore it and keep acting like things aren't happening, then like self-medicating can happen. I was in college at the time. I don't have a issue. I don't have a substance abuse issue, but when you have things that are untreated in your mental health, I believe that those are the roads that you could start leading down. You can want to go and be around, your friends, and if they're drinking and, smoking weed, whatever it looks like, those things can take your mind off of what your brain and body are feeling. And so it can be a scary road that can happen to people if they're ignoring the signs of even just an anxiety attack or a panic attack. I feel like that's the most alarming thing that we really should be paying attention to, is it's not normal to have a panic attack, a full blown out of the blue. That's not normal.
So did you do that? Did you turn to, you were in, like you said, you're in college. Is that what you did? Did you turn to drinking and hanging out with your friends, and did you ignore it? Did you go to counseling?
I think, no, I didn't go to counseling. I think I would try to talk to people about it, but I'm a very emotional, sensitive, big-minded. I've always been this way. People call me an old soul, or like I'm an empath. I just have, my thoughts sometimes are bigger than I can even comprehend as is. and I tried to communicate with people, but I felt like I just was very much ignored or pushed to the side or made to feel like, come on, Kayla, you're just being sensitive again, or you're just being emotional again. It was always that brushing off of, oh, come on, you're fine. Everything's fine. You're probably just doing that thing you do again. Yeah. Which then can really turn you off to talking about things when they are really actually big, big, big for you.
So at what point did that change? At what point did that change for you?
Yeah, when I became a mom, so that kind of leads me into, I think it's going to make me emotional because I do think that when these things go untreated and overlooked and not talked about, when I became a mom, I didn't have postpartum depression, but looking back, I definitely had postpartum anxiety. You feel this sense of, when you become a parent, it's an automatic sense of protection. You want to protect them and you want to provide and you want to love them, and you don't want to mess them up or have the things that messed me up in my childhood or my adolescence to mess, you don't want to make the same mistakes. And so that was really, it all just really hit me then. Like, all of my life and all of the trauma and all of the stuff I had pushed to the back of my brain or the back burner all came to a front when I became a mom.
And how old were you then? Were you done? You were done with school? And
no, I was going to school, and I couldn't figure out what once again, I wish I would have known what social work was, or a more in-depth look at it, because now I know what I should have been going to school for. Hence my career path now. And I got a job at Wells Fargo, and I was moving up the ladder, and then I got pregnant with my son, and I took maternity leave, and I just didn't ever go back to work until I started. I started my own little business at home, but yeah, no,
did you start counseling then? What happened then? Was there counseling, medication, anything?
So Easton wasn't, but I don't feel like so I had moved away from all of my family and friends. So it was just me and my ex-husband in Seattle. In the first year, I was pregnant, and that thing people talk about with Seattle, like the sun never coming out and it being dreary and depressing. I didn't really feel it the first year because I was pregnant and I was already tired and commuting. But when I had my son that next winter, when he was I had him in June, and so he's 4, 5, 6, 7 months. So, that time frame, I really felt it. I had nobody. I was alone too. For the first time, I was alone with no one to turn to, where I could just get in the car and drive to them or pick up a phone and say, hey, do you want to come over? I was alone with this baby and my thoughts and my trauma and I didn't think this is going to make me so emotional. But yeah, it was. And I still don't think in the time I realized what was happening with me. Still just very numb to what I needed, what I should have been doing for myself, what somebody should have reached out a hand and done for me, or the questions that people should have been asking me. But I also have come to realize that I've learned how to put on a really brave face. So people, I guess, don't really know that I'm going through something unless I say it, because I guess I do a very good job at, not that I'm trying to hide it. I think I don't want to burden people with anything. I want to know how they are, and I want to know what they need. And I wanted to know, I should say past tense, I just poured myself into everybody around me. And so, yeah, looking back, I still don't think I knew I was anxious, but I don't think I knew what was actually happening once again within me when I became a mom. I can look back and name it all off, but I still think in the time I was a new mom and I should have, I was happy and excited and I loved him. There was no part of me that didn't want to be a mom. I loved every second of it since the moment he was born. Yeah. But I just my mental health was basically a disaster at that point looking back.
Mhm. And so then what happened? When did that change?
Yeah, so we moved to California. So I was a little bit closer to friends and family. And my ex-husband and I were starting to have some issues and things that were, louder than you can ignore kind of at that point. And that was when it also became, when I became a mom, that was really also, I think I was then able to acknowledge what I had went through as a child. And realizing that I would never do that to my children. Like, how could that have happened to me? And so then I knew I needed to go to counseling because then the anxiety just was there. It wouldn't stop. I was seeing a primary care doctor and it's not a good word, but basically we were experimenting with what would work for me anxiety wise. And so,
but the primary care doctor, they weren't recommending counseling yet to you? That still wasn't happening?
I mean, I think they would say, do you have a counselor? Or like, have you thought about counseling? And I'd say it was really my perseverance to like, I need to do something about this. Like now it's seeping out into now the very thing I was scared of it when I became a mom is happening. I'm going to fail my children. I'm going to not do a good job, not because I don't want to be, but there's things that are bigger than me that are going to take over.
So you started going to counseling. Yeah. So you started going to counseling. Did you get a different diagnosis when you started going to counseling?
No. It was still an anxiety disorder. And then after some time we moved and I really loved my counselor. She would push me and like, I think as a kid we learned those things, happy, mad, sad as feelings. And she really pushed me to open up and to how did that make you feel? Which is such a like cliche counseling thing, but she made me dive and started the process of connecting some dots for me. Then we moved to Montana and I had my, in California, I had my second son. And so that was again, like a fresh, fun. I was a lot more relaxed as a mom with him though. I could take a breath and like, I didn't think if he wasn't around me, he wasn't going to die. Like I was a freak when I had Easton, like looking back. And I laughed about it when I had Bryce. It was still funny to me. And it shouldn't have been funny that I was struggling that bad. And it was played off as, oh, I was just such a freak. I was an anxiety-ridden mess. But like that should have been a red flag or a flag to say like, but why, Kayla? Like that's right, not right. It's not
what's happening here. Yeah. What's happening here. Yeah. So you go to Montana and then you picked up a counselor here.
Instantly I was like, I need to find a counselor because I knew what it was doing for me. And I started with a really good primary care doctor, and he made me do labs because I was like, I'm just always like, I'm exhausted and I don't feel excited anymore. I mean, my kids were the only thing that really made me feel anything. Everything else was just I was very numb. And not suicidal. Now looking back, I know that that's depression and how my body responds in a state of depression, but definitely numb to kind of an autopilot mode. of being a mom, going to work, being a wife, having a social life. I was in autopilot mode for sure. I was so disassociated from what was happening around me. I was lost.
Sounds like trauma or unresolved grief. I mean, that's what you're describing. And
Yeah.
that's why I asked you about, did you get a new diagnosis with the counselor? Because in terms like anxiety disorder and depression are like general catch-alls that people tend to get diagnosed with, right? That's sort of the same thing with me when I first got diagnosed, like, oh, you have depression, and I'm sort of air quoting that, but once you kind of get into it, usually then at some point you get a different diagnosis, because that's just a catch-all to kind of get the process rolling.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because then it's so silly too. Like, I think people would look at me like, what? So my younger brother has ADHD, and he was always my example of ADHD growing up. It was very loud and in your, like, not like he was, I mean, we were both kind of loud, but, he met all of the like checklist to what it looks like to society, ADHD, like,
Sure.
And I started talking to my primary care doctor, and I was like, I have watched a million TikToks about ADHD in women, and every single time I watch one, it literally describes me to a T, every single one of them. And people would be like, oh, okay, Kayla, but I'm like, my anxiety and depression have not been addressed in a sense where I don't ever feel like I feel okay, or not numb, or not in autopilot mode. Like, there's something else. They did more blood work, still like, well, that could be, because I described it as my anxiety is my like adrenaline, and it fuels me to like want to do better. And then my depression is when I hit that like want. So they're like, well, maybe you're bipolar. And I'm like, no, you're not you're not listening. Nobody for a while listened to me. And then I got into a psychiatrist here in town, and he was like, yeah, like I definitely think you have ADHD, and I think you have, I was diagnosed with PTSD and CPTSD, and everything started making more sense. Everything started clicking. I started on medication, and I felt a lot like my brain wasn't just in overdrive all the time. And I could be a mom again and be present and be, once I really dove, and I started EMDR therapy as well. So that really makes you dive deep into your trauma, into what happened, and makes your brain actually process what happened to you. So a lot has changed in 2.5 years for me, but it's really made so much sense. About looking back now, I can name all the things that I was going through or feeling or needing. And that's why it's important to talk about our stories and to share them, because I think there's a lot of us out there that are lost and don't know what to do, because we don't even have a word for what we're feeling.
Well, we have these catch-alls. Well, that's what we end up doing, is we put these catch-alls on them. And as you're talking, it's like I said, I mean, you're describing unresolved grief or trauma. It's an unprocessed experience. And we throw it in these catch-alls of anxiety disorder. And it's like, but once you dig in, you find it's really these other things that are going on, and you got to do the work. And I think, you're illustrating, I mean, some great points, and thank you for sharing your experience. But I think, this is really common, as you said, because we have a system that doesn't really do that good of a job. They don't really listen, right? As the patient or the client, as we would be, right? They don't really listen. It's like, we just want to check these boxes and sort of put you in this category. And what did it take? It took a psychiatrist to spend a little time. I'm a huge fan of psychiatry, because I think they take the time and they have more schooling So their knowledge base is way bigger, but the time factor with the knowledge base is it's tenfold compared to a counselor.
Yeah. Or a primary.
Or
Yeah.
a primary care who gets just
Yeah.
a general, they get a little bit of everything. They know a little bit of everything, but not in depth. And when I talk to people about mental health, people who really are digging in, most of them have gone to psychiatrists or a psychologist. Both are really good. And we have a shortage of those. We don't have enough. We hardly have any in our entire state of Montana. And this is where we should be driving people, in my opinion, not just to counseling, but to go further with your education and to think like we need to fill these gaps. Because yeah, I think once you go to a psychiatrist and you get that full evaluation, you get a much better diagnosis, which sounds like that's what happened for you.
I think it was a 90-minute evaluation of questions that were very deep and in depth. And it was every diagnosis umbrella, it wasn't just like anxiety, like, oh yeah, they're asking you questions. You don't know it at the time, but they're asking you questions and fielding, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, trauma. Yeah.
Right.
So
right. They're checking, they're basically crossing things off. They're asking you these in-depth questions for, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they're trying to narrow this down from all these diagnoses. Yeah, no, I think it's great that you were able to do that. And so, do you talk to your kids? How your kids, do you talk to them about mental health? I mean, you said you have this awareness, you see it in, you can see anxiety in your kids and.
A part of me, I was, in counseling, I've had to work through that guilt that if I would have known these things sooner, like, could I have stopped, making my kids feel X, Y, and Z, or, but we can't live in the past and I have to move forward. So I'm huge on, just last week, and I told my youngest has autism. So explaining that these things to him and he's nonverbal, it's not going to look the same with him, but also if mom's good, it's going to be good for Bryce. At the end of the day, if mom is good, it's going to be good for all of, it ripples down.
Sure.
But I see myself a lot in him. And so while I have that guilt, I also am really proud of myself and him that at least, 3 years ago, we might've been 3 years, or 5 years into his life, 6 years, but at least we started, at least we are having those conversations. At least, I can be honest with him and say, my head is just not good today. It has nothing to do with you. It's not anything you have to fix. I just want you to be aware so that if I seem not okay to you, that you don't, because I don't want him to take it on as his own, and I don't want him to have to make it better for me. It's not his job. And I think by having those conversations with just being open and saying, like, I'm not a perfect person either, Easton. Like, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to lash out. I'm going to, I'm a human being too. And I think it's important for our kids to see us as human beings and for us to have these conversations, because it starts at home. And if our kids don't feel comfortable telling us, hey, I don't feel okay in my body or my brain, then what makes us think that they're going to go and talk to anybody else about it? They're not. They're going to start acting out or self-medicating, or it's really important. So it's something that I do regularly with him, especially when I see that he's having behaviors that are not normal for him. I have this chart and mad is in the middle, because I think a lot of the time we see mad or anger, but really it stems from embarrassment, hurt, I mean, there's so
Exactly.
many
Yeah.
things.
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
so I show him that constantly, and I say, what I see anger on the outside right now, but what actually are you
Right.
feeling? So we have a lot of those kinds of conversations.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. I
So
mean, those are really progressive conversations between a mom and a child, and he's young, he's still young, right? And so, like, that's great because it's going to get him more in touch with his feelings, and that it's not about, like you said earlier, mad, sad, glad, like it's so much more complex than that. And
yeah.
that's such a simplified view. I found the same thing when I used to run this drop-in center. I used to run a group called Emotions, and that's what we did. We talked about each group was one different emotion each week to help people identify how are they feeling. Actually, it's not
Yeah.
you're really mad, you're actually disappointed. And there's a
Yeah.
difference between disappointed and mad. You're showing me
And sometimes,
mad.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I felt silly too, because even when I first saw this diet, I would go to it myself
Yeah.
and be like, Kayla,
Yeah.
what are you actually feeling? And
Right.
it seems so silly, but it's good for your brain to be able to know the word of what you're feeling. I think it's important for your brain to know the word of what so there you're feeling you're not associating that feeling with other people, and it reaps or it seeps out of us, and we project onto other people, and it can really be a cause for disaster if these conversations aren't being had within our own households of how are you actually, or what's
Right.
going on with you actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not
No, I agree.
accusatory, just yeah.
Well, and I think in particular that we're talking about the emotion of mad. I think that there's a real negative stigma around that emotion, that being mad is wrong. And there's nothing wrong with being mad. In reality, there's nothing wrong. It's another emotion, just like joy is another. I can feel joyous. That's another emotion. We don't say joy is wrong, but we say that with anger. And when people are mad and we say, oh, you shouldn't be like that, right? And we get really like, don't, because we're not allowing the conversation to go deeper of what's really happening and allowing people to explore that. And then there's this fear around mad, right? And so it's great. It's great that you're doing that, and that adults need a copy of that poster.
Yeah.
Not
We
just
should
for
put it on.
children.
We need to put it on the Facebook or the website.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, when you were saying all of that, it made me think about, from a parenting standpoint, it's really hard to take your own feelings and emotions and out of the equation when your kids are expressing themselves, like, because it can sometimes be, it can be offending. Like, you take it personal, like, I want to give you the best and I want to be the best mom. I mean, we all as parents want to, that is one thing I think we can all agree on. We just want to do the best job we can do. And when our kids are looking at us like, with such anger or sadness, or it's so hurtful. And I think the thing I'm not perfect at it. I will never be perfect at it. It's just something I'm trying to remember when I'm having these honest and open conversations with my kids, is trying to take and remove my feelings and what they're saying, and it not be personal to me. Because that's, I think it's what all of us jump to. It's a defense. It's a defense mechanism. I think that we've all as a society picked up, is there's no room for anger, because then that means like, now I have to defend myself. And I think if we stopped taking our own feelings and emotions out of the equation, and really just giving our kids that open platform to just express themselves, even if it is hurtful in the moment, that's, I think, when those really beautiful and deep connections and conversations start to happen with our kids, is they then trust us, that no matter what you say, no matter what you do, it brings you back to that unconditional love that parents and children have with each other. So
Agreed.
yeah.
All right, Kayla. Well, we are out of time. This was a really great conversation here. What would you like to say to the mom that's out there that's struggling and, stumbled across this podcast? What do you want to say to her?
Yeah, I would say if there's something in you that's telling you that something's not right, that something's been missed, that somebody's not listening or validating or hearing you, keep reaching out. If you live in Montana, you can always reach out to any of us at Montana Peer Network. We are huge advocates for mental health as a whole. Reach out to one of us. We will listen. We will validate you. We will point you in the right direction. If you trust a neighbor, a friend, your husband, whoever it is, keep opening up and keep talking, because, I think that's why the rise in, suicide is in today's time, is because people, I think, try to open up and they just either don't do a good job, or they're not heard or validated or listened to. I would hate for anybody to feel alone or lost in their mind. And I also think that people need to remember that you are not alone, and it happens more often than you think. If, like me, I put on a brave, happy smile face, I was not dying, but I was lost. I was helpless. I was hopeless. I was drowning with that smile on my face. So when you see people, take it for a grain of salt. You don't know what they're going through. Be kind and try to be empathetic to not what you're seeing on the outside, like anger or this confusingness. But yeah, if you're a mom or a parent in general and you're struggling, like, please reach out to somebody. There's somebody that will listen to you and cares, and we will help you. I know for sure at Montana Peer Network, but if you don't want to talk to a stranger, talk to somebody that you know and love and trust. It's so important.
Thank you, Kayla. And
thank you, Jim.
Yeah, and thank you to the listeners for tuning in. Each week we do a Recovery Talks podcast. We cover different topics around recovery, mental health, wellness, substance use, trauma. We try to keep it interesting with different guests, and you can listen to us on SoundCloud and on our website. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works, recovery is possible.
Recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.